I want to tell you something that might sound controversial at first, but it's backed by science, and it changed the way I train, recover, and age. For years, I believed, like many of us, that milk was the cornerstone of building strong bones and muscles. It was everywhere. School posters, commercials, even in nutritional guidelines. But here's the truth: the story is incomplete. Milk has calcium, yes, but calcium isn't enough. Your body doesn't just absorb calcium because it's present. It needs a delivery mechanism. And many people, especially over the age of 40, start losing the ability to properly metabolize calcium. That means it doesn't go to your bones. It goes to your arteries. It causes stiffness, inflammation, and long-term damage, especially if you're not getting the cofactors required for proper uptaking things like vitamin D3, K2, magnesium, and trace minerals. Now here's where it gets interesting and where my perspective changed. I came across a food that contains more calcium per gram than milk, but also naturally includes several of the cofactors needed to utilize that calcium effectively. Not only that, but it supports collagen production and muscle repair. That food isn't exotic, expensive, or hard to prepare. It's been right in front of us the whole time, hidden in plain sight. When I started incorporating it into my nutritional protocol, along with movement that activated my posterior chin and loading my bones vertically, something shifted. My joint pain reduced. I was lifting more with less soreness, and my posture improved. My sleep got deeper. I even noticed better neuromuscular coordination, because calcium isn't just for bones. It's critical for muscle contractions, heart rhythm, and neurotransmitter function. The deeper I went into the research, the more I realized how many people, especially men and women over 50, are walking around in a state of chronic micronutrient depletion, trying to fix symptoms with isolated supplements. But the body doesn't respond best to isolated nutrients. It responds to complete systems. When you feed it food that's biologically intelligent, food that's been co-evolving with human physiology, you unlock strength you thought you lost decades ago. And it's not just about bones or muscles. It's about independence, stability, longevity. It's about not fearing the stairs, the fall, or the fatigue. It's about being biologically resilient in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Not just surviving, but thriving. The solution isn't more of the same. It's smarter nutrition, targeted movement, and understanding the nervous system's role in everything from strength to sleep. So if you've been told that your bones weaken with age, or that muscle loss is inevitable after 60, I'm here to tell you something different. It's not age. It's environment. It's habit. It's what you're putting into your system and what you're leaving out. The good news is you can turn it around, and it starts with what you eat today. What you chew, absorb, and signal to your cells. There's a food that does more for your bones than milk ever could, and once you understand how it works and why, it will become part of your foundation for health, strength, and longevity. When I started diving deeper into bone health, especially after crossing the age of 50, kept encountering the same message. Get more calcium. Doctors said it, ads pushed it, and nearly every supplement aisle echoed that narrative. But even after years of drinking milk, taking calcium pills, and following the usual advice, my joints still ached, and I felt weaker than I should have. That's when I realized that most people over 50 aren't dealing with a calcium intake problem. They're dealing with a calcium absorption problem. And this distinction changed everything for me. You see, calcium is a critical mineral, yes, but it's useless unless your body knows how to absorb it and send it to the right places. Just increasing the amount you consume doesn't guarantee it ends up in your bones. In fact, without certain cofactors, specifically vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and magnesium, most of that calcium won't get absorbed properly at all. Even worse, it might get deposited in places it doesn't belong, like your arteries, leading to stiffness and long-term cardiovascular problems. That's what most people never heard. Too much unabsorbed calcium floating around your body can do more harm than good. Vitamin D3 is the first critical piece of the puzzle. This hormone, like vitamin, is essential for triggering calcium absorption in the intestines. Without it, most of the calcium you consume just passes right through your system. And as we age, our natural levels of vitamin D drop, especially if we're not spending consistent time in the sun. Add in a lifestyle that's largely indoors and a diet that lacks vitamin D, rich foods, and you've got a perfect recipe for calcium deficiency, despite getting enough calcium on paper. Next comes vitamin K2. Most people have heard of vitamin K, but they don't realize that K2 is different from the K1 found in leafy greens. K2 is responsible for directing calcium into the bones and teeth, where it belongs, and keeping it out of the arteries and soft tissues. It acts like a traffic cop for calcium. Without K2, even if you absorb calcium, your body won't use it correctly. This is especially important for older adults, where calcification of arteries can lead to dangerous complications. When I started adding vitamin K2 to my daily intake through fermented foods and targeted supplements, I noticed a real difference not just in my bone strength, but in how my joints felt during exercise. Then there's magnesium. It plays a critical role in activating vitamin D in the body and helps regulate parathyroid hormone, which controls calcium levels in the blood. Magnesium also works in harmony with calcium to keep muscles contracting and relaxing properly. Low magnesium levels are incredibly common in people over 50, often due to diet, medication use, or stress. The signs can be subtle: leg cramps, fatigue, anxiety, but they're all connected. When I began increasing my magnesium intake through foods like pumpkin seeds, spinach, and avocados, I noticed an improvement in my sleep, my recovery, and surprisingly, my digestion as well. What this told me is that bone health, and by extension, strength and mobility, is not about one nutrient. It's about synergy. It's about how these elements work together in your system. Too much calcium without these cofactors is like building a house with bricks, but no mortar. And that's the problem with many calcium-rich diets and supplement routines. They're one-dimensional. They look good on the label, but inside the body, they're incomplete. So I shifted my focus. I stopped obsessing over how much calcium I was getting in and started focusing on whether I was absorbing and utilizing it effectively. That meant tracking my vitamin D levels, adding fermented foods to support K2, and building a magnesium-rich diet with whole, unprocessed ingredients. It also meant giving my bones a reason to absorb that calcium by loading them through resistance training. Bones respond to stress. They adapt to the load you place on them. Without movement, all the nutrition in the world won't make a difference. I also learned to time my nutrients better. Taking calcium at night with magnesium helped improve muscle relaxation and sleep quality. Getting sunlight in the morning helped reset my circadian rhythm and enhance natural vitamin D production. Pairing high calcium meals with healthy fats increased absorption. These small, science-informed changes added up fast. Within weeks, my knees felt more stable. I could train with more confidence, and I recovered from soreness much quicker. What's wild is that so many people are told they have osteoporosis or declining bone density and immediately start high-dose calcium supplements without anyone checking their vitamin D or K2 status. We have the knowledge now to change that. We have studies showing that calcium with D3 and K2 significantly improves bone mineral density compared to calcium alone. We have data on magnesium's role in preventing fractures and muscle weakness. The science is here. It just hasn't reached everyone yet. I believe every person over 50 deserves to know this. They deserve to know their body isn't failing them. It's just missing a few ingredients. And when you give your body what it actually needs, when you stop focusing on isolated fixes and start thinking in systems, it responds. It rebuilds. It gets stronger again. The weakness, the fatigue, the stiffness. It's not the end. It's just feedback. And once I started listening to that feedback and responding with the right support, everything changed. You don't have to accept fragile bones as your fate. You don't have to live in fear of falls or injuries. With the right inputs, real food, consistent movement, and a focus on bioavailability, you can restore what you thought was lost. You can feel strong again, grounded again, capable again. And it all starts with this one shift. Stop focusing only on calcium intake. Start focusing on what helps your body use that calcium. That's where true transformation begins. There's a lot of noise out there when it comes to nutrition. Superfoods, supplements, pills that promise everything from better bones to endless energy. I've been through all of it. I've taken the powders, swallowed the capsules, and followed all the trendy diet rules. But none of it made a long-term difference in how I felt or functioned. Until I discovered one particular food, not a supplement, not a gimmick, but a real, whole food that contained more absorbable calcium than milk, and even more importantly, came with the nutritional cofactors that help your body actually use that calcium. This food didn't just support my bone health. It changed the way I moved, trained, and aged. Let's talk about why that matters. Most people think of calcium as a number. You hit your 1,000 mg per day, and you're good. But the truth is, your body doesn't recognize calcium in isolation. It recognizes it in context. And the context in which calcium appears in real food, balanced with magnesium, phosphorus, trace minerals, and sometimes even protein, is exactly what allows it to be absorbed efficiently and directed to the right places: your bones, your muscles, your nervous system. The problem with many modern calcium sources, like fortified foods or isolated supplements, is that they come without that context. Your body struggles to make sense of them. When I began adding this one food, let's just call it nature's forgotten powerhouse, into my daily meals, the results were almost immediate. Within a few weeks, I noticed that my knees didn't click as much going down the stairs. I stood taller. I slept more deeply. My post-workout soreness decreased, and I felt more grounded in my own body. It didn't feel like magic. It felt like my body finally had what it needed to repair itself, to build, to function. What's fascinating is that this food isn't new. It's not rare. In fact, it's been part of traditional diets for centuries. The problem is, in our modern, hyper-processed, convenience-driven world, we've stopped eating it. We've replaced real, nutrient-dense options with fortified snacks and protein bars. But this food, in its original form, delivers calcium in a bioavailable matrix. That means your body doesn't have to work hard to break it down or guess what to do with it. It's already packaged in a way your cells understand. I started combining this food with strength training, particularly resistance movements that apply pressure to the spine and long bones. And I noticed even greater results. My body wasn't just getting calcium. It was getting the signal that it needed to put that calcium to use. Because that's how bone remodeling works. You give the body the right inputs, both nutritional and mechanical, and it responds. The bones don't just sit there. They adapt. They get stronger in response to load and nutrients working together. Over time, I started learning that the same food supporting my bone density was also contributing to muscle repair. It was rich in amino acids, which helped me recover from workouts. It was high in collagen, supporting nutrients, which improved the health of my joints, tendons, and even skin. And because it was a whole food, it came with anti-inflammatory compounds that helped regulate my immune system. That meant fewer flare-ups, fewer random aches, and more consistent energy throughout the day. As I dove deeper into the science behind it, I found studies confirming everything I was experiencing. Researchers have compared this food to milk, and in many cases, it outperforms milk in calcium content per gram. Not only that, but it shows a higher absorption rate in the gut, especially in people over 50 whose digestive efficiency has declined. And because it's not dairy-based, it's a powerful option for those with lactose intolerance or casein sensitivity, both of which are more common with age. One of the most powerful benefits I noticed was the effect on my stability and balance. That may sound small, but it's huge. As we age, falls become a major risk factor for injury and loss of independence. Strong bones and muscles don't just prevent fractures. They keep you upright. They give you confidence. I started feeling more agile, walking up hills, more coordinated doing basic movements. It reminded me that health isn't just about avoiding disease. It's about increasing capacity. And this food helped me do exactly that. What amazed me was how affordable and accessible it was. We're often led to believe that building health requires spending hundreds on supplements or designer foods. But this nutrient-dense powerhouse was right there, hidden in the most unassuming part of the grocery store. When I started recommending it to my friends, especially those over 60, the feedback was consistent. They felt stronger. Their digestion improved. Some even reported sleeping better, likely due to the food's natural magnesium content, which plays a critical role in calming the nervous system and supporting deep sleep cycles. I also noticed something unexpected. It helped with mood. Calcium and magnesium both play key roles in neurotransmitter regulation. They influence serotonin, dopamine, and even GABA production. This food, rich in both, seemed to take the edge off my stress. I was calmer, more focused, less reactive. That's when I realized how interconnected all of this really is. Nutrition doesn't just affect your muscles or your bones in isolation. It touches your brain, your immune system, your emotional resilience. I wish someone had told me this earlier. I wish I'd known that building strength, staying upright, and maintaining independence wasn't just about exercise. It was about nourishment at the cellular level. And it wasn't about exotic, hard-to-find superfoods. It was about returning to the basics, trusting real food, letting go of the quick fixes, and feeding my body in a way that aligns with how it's built to operate. So now, every time I prepare a meal with this food, I feel a sense of gratitude, not just for the strength I've gained, but for the knowledge I've earned. I'm not chasing trends anymore. I'm building a body that works for the long haul. Strong bones, stable joints, restorative sleep. resilient muscles. And it all started with making one change egg, switching from isolated calcium sources to a food that delivers not just calcium, but the entire support system that makes that calcium count. This isn't about a diet. It's not about being perfect. It's about choosing powerfully, eating intentionally, and understanding how to unlock the strength that's still inside you. Because no matter your age, your body wants to heal. It wants to get stronger. You just have to give it the right tools. And sometimes those tools come in the form of a forgotten food that nature knew all along. When I first started thinking seriously about longevity and staying strong after 50, I assumed that the secret was mostly in nutrition. Eat clean, take the right supplements, avoid the junk, and yes, that helps. But what I didn't realize was that strength, especially the kind that endures into your 60s and 70s, isn't just about what you feed your body. It's about what signals you give it. Your body doesn't just build strong bones and powerful muscles because nutrients are floating around in your bloodstream. It builds in response to demand, to mechanical tension, to pressure. That's why nutrition without movement is a half-built equation. And it's also why I started to understand that bone strength and muscle mass depend on something deeper. Something that starts in the nervous system and travels through every cell. Your bones are not dead scaffolding. They are dynamic tissue, constantly breaking down and rebuilding. They respond to load. They respond to stress. When you pick up something heavy, when you press it overhead or squat it from the ground, you're not just using your muscles. You're signaling to your bones that they need to get denser, stronger, more resilient. But here's the piece most people miss. That signal doesn't begin in the bone. It starts in the brain. It starts in the nervous system, which governs everything. The contraction of muscles, the reaction of joints, and the very distribution of minerals like calcium and phosphorus in your skeletal structure. As we age, the nervous system can start to lose its efficiency. Reaction times slow. Coordination declines. But it's not because the brain is destined to deteriorate. It's because we stop challenging it. We stop training it. And when we stop giving the nervous system feedback, the body loses the reason to adapt. That's why resistance training, especially movements that involve multiple joints, balance, and coordination, are crucial not just for muscle, but for bones, and especially for the communication system between them. When I began pairing key nutrients with compound strength training, deadlifts, squats, rows, push presses, I noticed something profound. My posture changed. My spine felt more supported. My gait was steadier. I wasn't just getting stronger. I was becoming more structurally integrated. That's the key. Your body doesn't compartmentalize strength. It sees the entire system. And the bones, in particular, adapt not just to load, but to the direction of that load. That's why walking alone isn't enough. It's good. It gets the blood flowing. It's safe. But if you want to stimulate real bone remodeling, you need to load vertically with gravitational resistance, and you need to vary the angles and movement patterns. Now, this isn't about throwing yourself into Olympic lifts or trying to mimic professional athletes. This is about training with intention, training with awareness, giving your body a reason to change, and then supporting that change with recovery, sleep, and the right foods. Because after you've applied the stress, that's when the real magic happens, during rest. That's when your body decides whether it has the resources it needs to repair the micro damage and come back stronger. Without the raw materials, calcium, Magnesium, protein, vitamin D3, it can't do that. But just having the raw materials without the trigger means nothing happens. I remember a client of mine in his late 60s who had been taking calcium for years. His DECA scan still showed bone loss. He felt weak. He said, "I'm doing everything right. I'm eating clean, I take my vitamins, but I still feel fragile." We added 2 strength sessions a week, nothing fancy. Bodyweight squats, resistance bands, some loaded carries. And within 2 months, his energy was up, he was sleeping better, and most importantly, his balance improved. That's not just about bone density, that's about neuromuscular control. That's about the nervous system reclaiming its role as the conductor of the body's strength orchestra. The key takeaway here is that your bones and muscles listen to what you do, not just what you consume. And what you do has to be consistent. It has to be progressive. But it doesn't have to be extreme. Even 20-30 minutes a few times a week can trigger measurable changes, especially when paired with nutrient-rich foods. The synergy between food and movement is what transforms your biology. One without the other is incomplete. And let's talk about timing for a second. What I've found is that consuming calcium and protein after training, especially when combined with some form of vitamin D, amplifies recovery and improves the anabolic response. It's as if your body is more open to using those nutrients. That's because exercise increases blood flow, improves hormone sensitivity, and activates transport systems that pull those nutrients where they're needed most. So when you eat high calcium, mineral-rich foods within a couple of hours after training, you're not just feeding your hunger. You're feeding a repair process. You're literally telling your body, take this material and rebuild something stronger. There's also a deeper emotional layer to this. Strength isn't just physical. As we age, our confidence is closely tied to our physical capability. Losing strength can lead to fear of movement, which leads to less movement, which leads to even more loss. It's a vicious cycle. But you can break it. You can reverse it. I've seen it. I've lived it. When you reclaim control over your body, you reclaim control over your mindset. You move with purpose again. You trust your legs to support you. You feel your grip tighten. You lift yourself from a chair not with effort, but with ease. All of it starts with understanding that your body isn't broken. It's just under-stimulated, under-fed in the right ways, under-challenged. You are not past your prime. You are not declining. You are just waiting for the right input. And the beautiful thing about the human body, even after 50, even after 60, is that it adapts. It always adapts. It just needs the signal. It needs the stress, the nourishment, and the rest. That's the triad. That's the formula. And it works. So if you're sitting there thinking, I've lost too much ground, let me remind you, it's not too late. Your body still remembers how to be strong. It's built into your DNA. And with the right focus, nutrient, dense food, smart mechanical loading, and nervous system activation, you can rebuild what was lost. You can stand taller, move better, and live longer. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is, are you ready to start? The most overlooked secret to aging well is not in some expensive treatment, advanced supplement, or the latest exercise trend. It's in your daily patterns. What you do every single day either builds you or breaks you down, especially after 50. And I didn't realize how powerful the small choices were until they started adding up, both the good and the bad. For a long time, I assumed that as long as I worked out 3 times a week and ate mostly clean, the rest would take care of itself. But I was wrong. It turns out that the hours between workouts, the way you sleep, the way you move during the day, even how you breathe, these have just as much of an impact on your strength, bone density, and long-term performance as any heavy lift or protein shake. I remember waking up stiff every morning. My hips would ache, my lower back would tighten up, and I chalked it up to getting older. This is just part of it, I'd say. But that mindset nearly cost me my mobility. What was really happening was this: I was compressing my joints for 8 hours at a time in a chair. I was shortening my hip flexors. I was barely moving throughout the day except for my scheduled workouts. My fascia was tightening, my circulation slowing, and all that immobility was working directly against my strength training. I had to face the truth: exercise wasn't enough. I had to optimize the other 23 hours. One of the first changes I made was breaking up my day with intentional movement. I started walking more. Not just casually, but with intention. A brisk 10-minute walk after meals to stabilize blood sugar. Stretching in the morning before coffee to rehydrate my spine. Squatting to the ground a few times a day to maintain hip mobility. I even swapped my chair for a standing desk with a balance board. It wasn't about burning calories. It was about keeping my body awake, responsive, and alive. These small moments added up. My joints loosened, my posture improved, and the stiffness I thought was normal aging disappeared almost entirely. I also turned my attention to recovery. Most people underestimate how vital rest is. Especially after 50, your body needs more time and better tools to recover. I began prioritizing sleep like it was training. I stopped eating 2 hours before bed. I dimmed the lights after sunset to sync my circadian rhythm. I added magnesium, rich foods in the evening, and cut out blue light after 9 p.m. And instead of grinding myself down in the gym every day, I started cycling intensity. 1 hard day, 1 recovery day. It worked. My sleep deepened. My energy stabilized. I stopped relying on caffeine to push through the day, and instead, I woke up ready to move. There was another layer too: my breath. I had never thought much about breathing. It seemed automatic, and I assumed it took care of itself. But as I studied the connection between the nervous system and performance, I realized that my breathing was shallow, chest-driven, and reactive. I was living in a constant low-level stress state. So I began retraining my breath. Slow nasal inhales, long, extended exhales, box breathing before workouts to focus, parasympathetic breathing before bed to unwind, and the results were powerful. I could recover faster between sets. My heart rate variability improved. I felt less anxious, more in control, more rooted in my body. All from something as basic as breath. I also began to realize the power of consistency. It's not the big changes you make once. It's the small shifts you repeat every day. The same way compound interest builds wealth, consistent habits build resilience. Drinking water first thing in the morning, getting 20 minutes of sunlight before noon, preparing meals with real ingredients, prioritizing protein at breakfast. These weren't dramatic rituals. They were sustainable, repeatable, and they worked. My energy no longer peaked and crashed. I no longer needed naps in the afternoon. My cognition sharpened. I wasn't just aging slower. I was reversing the clock in ways I could feel. Another piece of the puzzle came from connection. I didn't expect this. But isolation, which many people experience as they age, has a profound impact on physical health. When you're connected to others, training partners, family, community, your motivation is higher, your stress levels drop, and your hormonal profile improves. Oxytocin, dopamine, even testosterone rise when you're regularly engaged with others. I began prioritizing time with people who challenge me, laugh with me, push me. And my vitality increased. I didn't feel like I was trying to stay young. I felt like I was living fully. The truth is, aging well is less about stopping decline and more about maximizing adaptation. Your body will respond to the inputs you give it, no matter your age. And those inputs are not just sets and reps in the gym. They're the air you breathe, the food you eat, the light you absorb, the people you engage with, and the thoughts you dwell on. Each one is a switch. And when you start flipping them intentionally, you change not only your health, you change your identity. I realized that becoming stronger after 50 wasn't just a goal. It was a new way of living. It required honesty, discipline, and curiosity. I stopped waiting for motivation. I built routines that worked even when I didn't feel like it. I stopped chasing youth and started building wisdom. I looked at every stiffness, every ache, every drop in energy as a message. Not as a punishment, but as feedback. And I listened. I responded. And I adapted. It's easy to believe that decline is inevitable, that weakness and fatigue are just a part of aging. But that's a lie. Most of what we accept as aging is actually just a lifetime of missing inputs. Nutritional gaps, inactivity, shallow breathing, poor sleep, stress overload, disconnection. But when you fill those gaps, even slowly, you reignite the machine. You remind your body what it's capable of. And that potential is still there. No matter how old you are, your biology is waiting for your decision. I'm not a superhero. I'm not genetically gifted. I'm just someone who finally stopped outsourcing my health and started building it with intention. And now, at an age where most people are shrinking, slowing, and stepping back, I'm growing, expanding, and stepping forward. Not because I'm special, but because I return to the basics and practice them with discipline. And if there's one message I could leave you with, it's this: you are not too late. You are not too old. You are not too broken. You are simply under-recovered, under-challenged, and under-supported. But that can change starting today, with one breath, one step, one better choice. Because the body you build after 50 might just be the strongest, smartest, and most powerful body you've ever had.